if you speak to Jeff Inger, I'm sure he's going to disagree with my opinion with this. But we went back and forth on this.
Mm.
I've always been of the mindset that if we're going to talk about condemning somebody, now I don't mean condemning them to death, but that, you know, we think that they're
not the best person,
that they're bad guys.
Yeah, right.
That's how I'll politely phrase it.
Mm.
I said, now, maybe I'm a bit naive, but I go back to my training as a detective.
Right.
If you're going to tell me this person committed war crimes, and that's what it really comes down to. You're telling me this person committed war crimes. Show me the proof. Show me the proof. Now, I know I'm going to sound slighted in this, but what I fall back on is my military training, as well as being a detective. In the military, if I was overseas and my squad was ambushed, and one of my Marines, I was a corporal overseas. When I came back to the States, I was promoted to the rank of sergeant. I was the assistant platoon sergeant when I came back. But overseas, I was a corporal in charge of a squad. If one of my men was murdered, purposely murdered, whatever you want to call him, partisan, communist, whatever, and I'm overseas with my squad, and I had said this, I don't care. You kill one of my men, I will make it my life's mission to hunt down the men who did it. That's my position. Now, I know people will not agree with that, but you got to know where I'm coming from.
Your background.
Okay.
It's an intense background.
Very intense. And there's not room for discussion and the niceties of life.
No, as you said earlier, it's black and white.
The world was black and white.
Right.
Okay. Now I'm looking at Kurt Waldheim's background, being told about it. And again, maybe I sound naive. I don't mean to be. But I consider myself a very fair person. I think if you were on trial for a serious crime, you would want me as one of your jurors. Not because I was law enforcement or military, but I'm going to be as fair as I can be. You're going to have to prove to me how guilty this person is. Okay? So with that said, please show me the proof. Well, Don, you know, he was a war criminal. He was this. He was a Nazi. He was this. He was that. I don't like a lot of young people look at somebody in history from hundreds of years ago and condemn them today and want to tear statues down because of the way the world was back then. I'm a realist, okay? The way the world was, and I'm not defending anything about being, you know, the Nazi regime or anything.
Of course not.
He was drafted into the army. He was Austrian. He was studying in college. He became a second lieutenant. He was put on the headquarters detail in Eastern Europe for tracking down partisans who were killing German soldiers. Now, I know everybody's got their own opinion with this, but I'm approaching this through the eyes of a soldier or a Marine. Mm-hmm. I'm not condoning killings at all. But I'm saying, go back in time to the way the world was then. Your country was absorbed into Germany before the war. Now you're drafted. You were in college. Back then, I guess that was following orders, which you had to do. You didn't have a choice to protest like college kids do here. They put you against the wall and shoot you. Okay? This is how I'm looking at it. Going back to those times. Yeah. Now you're a college guy. You're a second lieutenant in the Army. You're sent to where you're sent. You're an intelligence officer on movements of the partisans who were killing German soldiers. Right or wrong, that's how I look at it. I try to dissect things. One of the biggest things I see with people, and sometimes they get into big arguments with me, which I don't like confrontation.
Neither do I.
But you got to look at things realistically, not emotionally, okay? Again, show me where he pulled out his revolver and he shot somebody. Or he went out in the field and commanded a platoon or a squad of men and executed people. Show me the proof.
I have a saying
we got into a thing back and forth with me and Jeff, to where he sent me articles and things, you know, and I respect that. But again, show me the proof where he ordered people to be murdered. Okay, innocent people to be murdered. He was an intelligence officer, a second lieutenant. That's like on the very bottom of the pecking order in the military. Staff NCOs have more respect, get more respect than a second lieutenant does in the Army. And that's a fact. Most people don't realize that because of experience and knowledge. You could say he was a Nazi, member of the Nazi Party. George Patton, at the end of the war, described local people in Germany. He got jammed up for this one, amongst other things. He compared people belonging to the Nazi Party, and it's, you know, back in the day, to being a Democrat in the United States. You're part of the political party. Now, I know it's apples and oranges. Okay?
Yeah. I think it's apples and pears.
Okay. But, and I know people won't agree with this, I'm sure. But I've always been a fair-minded person.
Yeah.
Show me the proof. Well, he had to know this and he had to know that. I really believe in my heart, a lot of people did know what was going on. But I think that they covered up a lot of stuff because they didn't want a lot of people to know what was going on. You know, and the Holocaust, it just almost unimaginable horror that took place. And I agree with that. But we're talking about one man who was drafted into the Army. He was sent to Eastern Europe. He was on some German general staff who himself was executed for war crimes after the end of the war. I think 1947, he was executed. If there was proof, actual proof, individually, that Kurt Waldheim personally supervised and ordered executions, I think he would have been in Nuremberg, or he would have been in one of those trials.
I think with everything, context is key. And the context, I think, in general, just doesn't get evaluated nowadays. Because I don't know. I could read any article under the sun about something like this, and we're talking with Don Sadowy here in the Mike and Mayhem podcast, Tales in the Boom Room, Part 2, Volume 1. I wouldn't know. I mean, it's kind of like you see in the science fiction movies. They're able to take a time machine back to those moments. We're not able to do that. So it's just, you know, it's secondhand. And you're really, especially as a college student, it's hard to believe that it's a year and change now since I graduated. I had great teachers, don't get me wrong. But you're at the mercy of a professor, and not only that, you're at the mercy of a professor's personal interpretation of events, which then spreads to the student, and therefore the student absorbs that, and that becomes their mindset. And it's a herd mentality nowadays.
I absolutely agree with you on this. Now, depending on who your professor is or what newspapers you read, they put their spin on the facts.
Yeah. And
again, I said to my wife, I always considered myself a reasonable man. I was on 3 juries. I actually made it into the jury box for 3 different trials. You know, years ago, they wouldn't take you if you were, retired law enforcement. This one trial I was on was a criminal trial, was an active New York City police captain and a female FBI agent who was active. And here I was, retired detective. And the defense counsel, after, you go through this questioning process, if you're going to be in a jury. And it's a bit lengthy. And the defense counsel kept all 3 of us. Now, this was a very experienced defense attorney. The end result was that we found the person not guilty. Now, the other people in the jury room, there was almost some heated discussion. He's this, he's that, he's this, he's that. Okay. That is hearsay and innuendo.
Right.
This is coming from the prosecutor. And we sent notes out several times. I won't get into the details of
specifics, but
we wanted to know, tell us this, tell us that, tell us this. And the prosecutor didn't have it. What happened was the prosecution didn't do their homework with the police. And we felt, okay, you say that this person committed this crime. Prove it to me. Show me the facts, and I'll weigh the facts. And we found the person at the end of the trial not guilty. And the 3 people who were leading the conversation, but we listened to everybody in that jury room, we were the 3 that felt this person's not guilty. And the rest of the jury was like, how could you say that? Oh, this, that, this, that. I said, you're looking at this emotionally. Show me the facts. I'm a reasonable man. I'm an experienced investigator. Show me the facts that prove beyond a shadow of doubt. Well, it didn't even come close to that. Didn't even come close to that. At the end of this trial, when he was found not guilty, this young man, he broke down in real tears, crying hysterically. His attorney grabs us outside. And we said to him, why did you pick the 3 of us to stay? He said, I defended numerous people in 34 years, most of them guilty. He says, I really felt that this guy was telling me the truth and he's not guilty. He says, I needed clear-headed people, not to act with emotion, but to find the facts. Right. Said, that's why I kept the 3 of you on this jury.
Wow.
So just a little story I share. I always considered myself, I told my wife, I'm a reasonable man. You talk to me about something, we'll talk. But anyway, this is where, and I don't mean to make more of it than it is, but this is, I think, one of the only times in working on the manuscript for this book that me and Jeff differed greatly. And I respect him for that. I do.
Right.
But I just have my own feelings on it. But and he sent me many things to read, which condemned him. Okay. Mm-hmm. Listen, you didn't have a choice a lot of times.
Yeah.
Back then in the world, And I'll give the benefit of the doubt. But the bottom line is, if you tell me that this guy is a war criminal, show me the proof. Show me an article that was personally witnessed by anybody to say he ordered or he personally carried out a murder of innocent people. And I didn't see it. I didn't see it. And I read a lot. I read quite a bit. And yeah, I was, I guess, young, a bit naive back at that time in my life. You know, I just came out of the service. You know, the world was black and white. I'm working at the UN, and things are just revealing, you know, about things. And I'm not going to give the story up.
No, don't. Yeah, I don't want you to spoil it.
UN, point in the UN, where I call it politics makes strange bedfellows.
It does.
Between Kurt Waldheim and somebody else who was a head of state for a ceremony. And I said to myself, I can't believe I'm standing here knowing what I know. So that's a bit of a teaser for the book. And you know what I'm talking about.
Yes, the book is, who is it? Well, you'll have to find out if you buy Rendered Safe, Tales of an NYPD Bomb Tech. And I have a disclaimer that just came here from my attorneys. It says the opinions expressed in this podcast do not necessarily reflect. I'm just kidding. But that, no, so, no, that was a very fascinating deep dive into that time. No,
I try to be very honest for you.
No, and I appreciate that. And you can get a deeper dive if you read the book as well.
I want to point something out that we had talked prior to this about things, and I want to make it clear that I was not given a list of any of the questions you were going to ask me.
This is all spontaneous.
Yeah.
That is,
and I wanted it to be, and I want to be as honest as I can with you, you know, on these things. I'm not a pro-Nazi or anything like that, you know, but just again, I consider myself to be a fair and open-minded person. Now, I know Jeff feels different on this, you know, but listen, again, the thing I learned working at the UN, we could agree to disagree and still be friends.
Right.
But I'm very blessed. I'm very blessed that I met Jeff Engber. I mean, I can't say enough good things about this guy. I had these stories rolling around in my head for years, and a very good friend of mine, Bernard Johnson from the State Department, who was my sponsor for my clearances and sent me around the world, he said to me, Donnie, he says, you got to sit your butt down and you got to start writing these stories down, because as you get older, you may start forgetting them. And he said, these stories need to be told. And I've actually had somebody who was a retired principal with a background totally opposite of mine, one day at breakfast in the diner, and he said he purchased my book, and he sat there and he sat back and he looked me in the eye and he says, you know, Don, he says, come on, tell the truth. A lot of these stories are made up, aren't they? And I was flabbergasted. I says, I guess you really don't know who I am, but that's okay. But none of these stories are made up. Now, just to qualify that, Jeff Engber said to me during the 2.5 years we worked part-time on this, it was really a big undertaking to do this. I had no idea, you know, what it took to actually do a book like this. Said to me, I never thought that you were lying, telling me about the stories, but some of them sounded so fantastic. I needed to talk to people who were with you there during that time.
Just to confirm.
Which we did, and confirmed all the stories.
So I do want to accelerate now to finally October of 1980, which is when you got to the New York City Police Department. Now we transition into your NYPD years. This is in the midst of really, I mean, New York of the 70s and 80s is immortalized often through film. Like if you ever seen Mean Streets, you get a glimpse of what 70s New York was like. Obviously, Taxi Driver, Serpico, the list goes on of films that came out during that time. New York's in a bad spot crime-wise. The regression is serious. And here you are coming into the NYPD during this time, you know, obviously very, not your average rookie, obviously given your work prior with the UN and of course in the Marine Corps, But your first command upon graduating from the police academy, I believe, was the 76th precinct in Brooklyn. And so you were around some really great, resourceful, smart cops, which you talked about in the book during that time. And don't spoil it, obviously. But, you know, I guess, you know, those early years, I can't ask you one specific question about that because so much happened way before you got to the bomb squad. So just those 5 years, I guess what I want you to do is take me through, without spoiling stuff, the cops that helped you along the way.
Sure.
And, you know, the funny interactions you had along the way, of which there were plenty of. And, of course, the close calls that I think every cop and fireman in New York City has on the job.
Oh, so when I went into the job in 1980, I was not 21 years old with no life experience. I was 27 years old. I had been around the world, had served over 4 years active duty in the Marine Corps, 3.5 years with UN security. I learned a lot. I will basically say I came in with a lot more life experience than the average young man or young woman coming.
Right. I would agree.
A difference of 7 years makes kind of a big difference. When I came into the job, looking back, I didn't come in with any aspirations of, oh, I'm gonna make this city a safer place. I'm gonna be, you know, I'm gonna be the good guy, and I'm gonna do all good things. I mean, basically, yeah, but I didn't have any of this stuff going on in my head. You know, I will say because of my life experience, I was going in with both eyes open.
Right.
I was not the young, naive fellow I once was. Okay. One of the things they don't teach in many places, like police departments, even though it's considered a paramilitary organization, okay, with very strict discipline and rules, very unforgiving. I went in with my eyes open, with no expectations of any sort, really. I came in with my eyes open. I will say what I found. You know, you had asked me, and I'm sorry I didn't answer it more clearly before, about my experience in the police academy. Police academy, the physical aspects of it was a walk in the park. Firearms, no problem. Where I will tell you honestly, where I had difficulty was in the academics, in particular, learning the penal law, and then on top of that, a separate book called the Criminal Procedure Law for New York State. They kind of overlap in certain ways, but yet they don't. And when you're a rookie in the academy, there's no leeway. You know, it's either you know it or you don't. And I found the academic aspect of learning the law. Now, police science, actually, I found very interesting in some of the other, you know, academic classes. But I knew that I had to go for tutoring, which they offered after the end of the day. You know, you went on your own off-duty time, but it was at the academy. And I found a lot of times the rooms were packed with people for going to tutoring. And I'll say that was the difficult part for me, going through the police academy, is that now I get put into Brooklyn. I get put with some people that you could have done a movie or a TV series about, cops and detectives, super knowledgeable about life on the street and the realities and how to deal with it and maneuver through different situations, which impressed me greatly. It really did. I was in awe of some of these cops and detectives. I was very fortunate. Some of them took me under their wing. I was savvy enough to know that you treat these men with great respect, and you don't just walk up and ask stupid questions. You know, you learn what the pecking order is. And I was very fortunate. I'm going to throw some names out.
Please do.
Detective Jimmy Russo. Man was a legend, an absolute legend. He just passed away about 2-3 years ago. If you ever worked in Brooklyn with guys who worked in Brooklyn, you throw that name out, and the first thing that happens is a big smile on their face and says, "Oh, geez, you know Jimmy." And there's a story in there in particular, which I'm not going to tell the end of it. Jimmy had me and another young Irish rookie. We were just in the area, and there was going to be a major riot between two Hasidim organizations. Now, prior to this, for those of you who might know, maybe you don't know, there was a attack against a police precinct in Brooklyn by the Hasidim, hundreds and hundreds of them. And they always gave the nickname after that, you know, cops with dark humor. Of course, we have with things named the precinct after that, Fort Surrender. Okay. So these two groups were lined up on the street like two armies ready to do battle. And Jimmy Russo tells us, "We're going there. We'll put it over the air, and we're going to go there." Jimmy said, "Don't touch your baton, your nightstick. Don't keep your hand away from your gun belt and your gun. Keep your hands at your sides and walk right behind me. And don't make eye contact with nobody. And just follow my lead." And I'll tell you, it's, well, you know the story.
Yes. And Bill Ryan in the chat does know it too, you know.
Unbelievable.
Yeah.
This is one of the people that helped train me. Now, very quickly, there was some street cops, and I just got off the phone with Jeff Matlin, who was one of these guys. I looked up, I was on the phone with him last week.
Mm-hmm.
He said, anybody, almost anybody, could be a police officer, but it takes someone special to be a good street cop. And he looked like, there's photos of him in my book, him and Larry Riccio. Larry is barrel-chested with a beard, and he's a no-nonsense guy. And Jeff was the collar man. And Jeff looked like a young Tom Selleck at the time. And man, all the girls, if he just gave them a smile, they were like ready to give them their phone number. But what a great guy. And one of the things we reflected on was that they took a liking to me, thinking I was a very quirky young man. Okay.
Gee, I wonder why.
In the way that I thought about the world. You know, again, I came into the job with life experience. You know, I wasn't coming in with rose-colored glasses on. I was a realist, but I liked the way that they spoke to people respectfully, no matter who it was. They were very fair. And if somebody got locked up, they were 110% guilty of doing whatever they did to warrant being locked up, you know? And I remember we would show up to different scenes, and either Larry or Jeff would say, "Look, we can handle this way or that way. There's a choice A and there's a choice B. Whatever happens isn't as a result of us. coming in like gangbusters. It's a result of your bad decisions. So now you have to make a choice. You know, we didn't come in and just lock people up. We tried to de-escalate things. And that was the thing I was very impressed with. They would try to de-escalate the situation a lot of times. And many times people realize you're going to get locked up. You're going to go to jail. You're going to have this on your record. Do you want that? You know, we would try to explain things to people and said, you know, you got to make good life decisions. You can't be doing this. But then there were people who were career criminals. And they realized too, once they're in custody, that's it. Stop fighting. We're not going to do anything to you. You know, like you see in these cop movies, you know, where guys are pounding on guys who are in handcuffs and stuff.
Yeah.
That was drilled into me in the very beginning of my career. Once they're in custody, they stop fighting. That's it. That's it. It's over. Now we process them. One of the things that I felt, and you go through a lot of emotions, seeing a lot of bad things too. The biggest thing is you have to remind yourself not to lose your humanity. Not to lose your humanity. They're kicking me, spitting in my face, hitting me with stuff, not because I'm Donald Sadowy, because I'm wearing that uniform. And for whatever's going on in their head that day, good, bad, or indifferent, I'm there. I'm catching the brunt of it. I've been attacked, unprovoked. I got put in the hospital a few times, nothing life-threatening, where I had to stay home for a few days. I'll be honest, I gave as good as I got. You know, if somebody was trying to hurt me, I had to defend myself. You know, and you're trying to put a hurting on me, I got to put a hurting on you to stop you from doing what you're doing.
You don't want to get hurt. You don't want to die.
I'm sorry?
You don't want to get hurt, and you definitely don't want to die.
No, but it just seemed to go with the territory. So the guys that really inspired me to be the best street cop that I could was Jeff Matlin and Larry Riccio. And a lot of times, if one of them made a collar, now there's an empty seat in the radio car. They'd go to the sergeant at roll call. Yeah, Sarge, put the kid in the car with me. I'll take him. I'll teach him. You know. So like if Larry was off, I was with Jeff. If Jeff was off, I was with Larry. I want to do another teaser.
Please. More than welcome.
I'm in uniform. I'm on patrol. Now I'm on the east side of Manhattan. It's bitter cold out. It's the winter. It's to the city. It's this huge apartment complex opposite the UN. It's between 1st and 2nd Avenue. It's this huge complex of apartments. And the sergeant gets a call that there's a possible bad smell, possible DOA in an apartment, elderly woman who lives by herself. I get there. Larry and Jeff are there. This was for any members of the service that are watching this. This is before pre-arraignment in Manhattan. That if you lock somebody up, you were with them 24, 36 hours in the system. It was horrible. It was horrible. You got no sleep. You got no rest.
Right.
So I was like maybe 24, 26 hours. Now I'm back to work. I never took off my uniform. I never had anything to eat. I didn't sleep. And I'm a rookie. So the rookies get all the unfavorable little assignments.
So I do want to accelerate ahead. Oh, go ahead. Go ahead. Sorry,
go to the city, and it's a DOA. And later on, Larry and Jeff came back to check on me. And I'm going to leave it there to say that's one of the most funniest situations that I could recall that had happened to me when I was in uniform. So again, just a teaser.
That's fine. And we're talking with Donald Sadowy here in the Mike Newton podcast, the miniseries Tales from the Boom Room, in which I chronicle members of the arson and explosion as well as bomb squad. So I want to do a quick shout out to the live chat. Keith James is in the live chat. Keith, good to see you, pal. Of course, I mentioned Bill Ryan earlier. Bill Ryan's here watching us. Bill, I appreciate you giving us a view. Of course, Bill was on this podcast and he was great. And my sister's here. My older sister's here. So shout out to my older sister who's nice enough to tune in, of course, for an episode I've been looking forward to recording for a long time. And it's been as good as advertised. I'm having a lot of fun talking with Don. Bill Ryan says, Fort Surrender, 66 precincts. I worked there for 6 months in 1985.
He knows exactly what I'm talking about with that story.
Yeah, he does. Bill Ryan, a great,
Good to hear you, Bill. Good to hear you. Hope you're doing well, my friend.
I hope so, too. Shout out to Bill. He's the one that actually, he's part of the reason why you and I are talking. He put me on to you. He recommended you to me. And well, I said, sure.
I greatly appreciate that. Let me just say here and now, it was always a pleasure working with the men and women from Arson Explosion Squad. They were our sister squad. And my memories of working with Bill, he was the quintessential gentleman. Quintessential gentleman as a detective. Always a pleasure of working with him. Bill, I'm going to give out a quick little story. It's not in the book, but it refers to a story in the book about the 5 letter bombs that were at the UN headquarters
in 1997. Yes. Now,
and we were there round the clock for several days, and the chief of detectives wanted to know, what the heck are my detectives doing at the UN for a couple of days and nights? Nobody briefed them. Like, they knew, but they didn't know.
Is this Chief Ali?
No. This is way before.
Okay.
I can't recall who the chief detectives was at the time.
Okay.
And I forget who the CO was at the time of A&E, but somebody down at headquarters had Bill Ryan jump into an unmarked car, drive down to the UN, make his way through this litany of security to get to where we were down in the bowels of the UN, because he can't just walk in.
No, of course, there's a process, understandably.
Yeah. So he had to go through this whole layers of security, just because you're a detective. That's international territory, by the way. You cannot just walk in on official duty. You have to be invited in. So he goes through this whole litany, finds us. We're rendering safe live letter bombs down in the garage of the UN. It wasn't actually in a garage. It was in this designated area that had access for air, but it was like enclosed in like these steel and I-beams and stuff. It was a really secure area. So if anything was to go off during the procedure, the blast pressure and frag would just go straight up the shaft. It's hard to describe it. It's just this huge shaft, but it's on a garage level, but it's off from it. Right. So we're down there working like this, and he shows up and he said, "Listen, somebody's got to go down." The chief is like, "What are you guys doing?" I says, "Bill, look at what we're doing. You know what we're doing." He says, "No, the chief wants to talk to somebody who knows what's going on here for the last few days, and you guys are still working." He says, "I was told the chief called the CO of the bomb squad, and the CO of the bomb squad told the chief, well, I got senior men working down there." So, and I think at the time I started transitioning to being the intelligence coordinator. So I was kind of like the liaison with everybody.
Yeah.
So they said, go down there and pick Sadowy's butt up and put it in the car and bring him forthwith back to the chief's office. And Bill did. I don't know if you remember this story, Bill. You're briefing me as to what's going on in the chief's office and whoever the lieutenant was in A&E. And but the chief wanted to know all the details. So thank goodness Bill was good, because you could be walking into the lion's den, and there's a lot of personalities, big personalities with chiefs and stuff and ego.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Thank you, Bill, for helping to brief me for that ride, lights and sirens, back to 1PP.
Well, you never told me this story when you came on. Now I'm upset. You never told me this, but I guess I'm glad I'm hearing it now.
Well, the only reason, you know, Jeff Ingber used to tease me and say, you know, I interviewed so-and-so who worked with you from back in the day.
Mm-hmm.
Don, you never told me about this, that, this, that. Why didn't you tell me? And I said to him, quite honestly, Jeff, I forgot. You know, so like
so much.
I'll hear somebody's name or somebody say something to me, and it'll bring back a memory. But Jeff, Bernard Johnson has been like a big brother to me. I love this guy. We go back to 1977. He was in the State Department working at the U.S. Mission, and I met him across the street working UN security. He invited me up with the ambassador for a ceremony upstairs for the Marine Corps birthday. And the friendship's been there professionally and personally more years than I can count. But yeah, so thank you, Bill, for briefing me, because I didn't know what I was walking into. And that could be a career-ending thing, walking in saying the wrong thing, and somehow it's misinterpreted by some powerful chief with a big ego that his head's so big he can't put a hat on. So, but there were a lot like that. But there were a lot of great chiefs. I want to tell you, one of the best chief of detectives I ever worked for was Joe Borelli. Joe, hands down, you know, he started working out in the bureau many, many years ago. Old school detective bureau boss. And he would talk to you like a gentleman. And, you know, if you asked him, Chief, I'm going to give you everything I got on this case, but please don't release it to the press, to the DCPI, because it's active and we're moving on this as quickly as we can. And he was a man of his word. He
wouldn't do that.
And Chief Anemone, just great. Just two of the best chiefs in my entire career that I ever worked for and had interactions with, and never spoke down to you. Spoke to you, you know, with dignity, you know, no nonsense, but never talked down to you, unlike many of their predecessors.
And let me just say, by the way, now that you mentioned Chief Anemone, let me do a shameless plug here. Chief Anemone, of course, will be coming up next Monday at 1 o'clock Eastern Standard Time. It'll be airing live once again, like this interview is airing on my YouTube channel. So Bill Ryan, I better see you in that live chat for Chief Anemone, and Don, you too. I better see you on my YouTube channel next week. I'll send you the link so you can watch that interview with the chief, who spoke, as I said to you off the air, spoke very well of you. Yeah, so Bill says, of course, tell Don I said hello. So I'm sure he appreciates that story. And once again, Detective Ryan, I'm glad you're here. So speaking of walking into the unknown, that segues perfectly into getting to the bomb squad in 1985, where you would wind up working the rest of your career until your retirement in 2000. And so, I mean, I talked about New York City, you know, just jumping with crime in the late 70s, early 80s. It's jumping with bomb scares too, because, I mean, the New York Daily News did an article on this a few years ago. It wasn't, I mean, now we look at bombs, we look at terrorism in a post 9/11 world as it being a major, you know, it's a top priority in every major city. It's always on the mind of cops and civilians alike that are just within these cities. But back then, I mean, domestic terrorism, for as crazy as it sounds to say, was really, it wasn't a shocking thing. Bombs went off repeatedly throughout the 70s, not just by the FALN, but by the Black Liberation Army, the Black Panthers, the Weather Underground. There were so many different extremist groups, I should say. And in the early 80s, the bomb squad has lost, for brief context, the bomb squad has lost 6 members in the line of duty over its 118-year history. We're going to talk about the 6th casualty, who Don knew personally a little later in the podcast, but the bomb squad could have had more casualties, because on New Year's Eve 1982, Richie Sempt and excuse me, Tony Sempt, I should say, and Richie Pastorella. Richie Pastorella, thank you. Were investigating 4 bombs actually that were planted throughout New York City on New Year's Eve. And think about that for a second before I let Don take it away. Think about this for a second. New Year's Eve in New York City is a big celebration. You see it in Times Square. Everybody's huddled together. You know, it's a big assignment for the NYPD and specifically its Counterterrorism Bureau to monitor. And so here we are. It's 1982. It's New Year's Eve. 4 bombs are planted within a few blocks of each other, including one outside one police plaza in the federal section of Manhattan. Detectives Pastorella and Sempt are dispatched to try to render these devices safe. One of them goes off, severely injuring. Before I continue, Bill Ryan says Jerry Sheehan, who would later command the bomb squad, was the CEO of Arson and Explosion at the time of that story that you mentioned earlier, 1997. So, you know, that being said, I mean, Detective Sempt and Pastorella respond down. Another officer by the name of, I know his first name was Rocco. His last name was Pascarella, I believe, similar to Richie's.
It looks similar, but it's pronounced slightly different.
Yeah.
Now Rocco was the uniformed police officer.
Yeah, he was not in the bomb squad.
Assigned to headquarters security. And again, you know, I don't know if this sounds corny or not, but I'm going to defer to what we were talking to earlier.
Mm-hmm.
You got to go back to that moment in time when something happened. You can't compare it to today. Okay? New York City in the world was a different place.
Yeah.
Headquarters security, the sergeant tells them, listen, a bomb went off at the federal building in Brooklyn. We got bomb threats through 911 that there's a couple of bombs planted out here. Let me verbally paint this picture. It's New Year's Eve, 1982. I was a rookie in uniform on a fixer on a U.S. mission.
Which is a post.
Yeah, a diplomatic post. I remember that like it was yesterday, and I'll tell you why. Of course, because of the memories of this. It was bitter cold. It was a clear night. The winds were whipping, and it was, I don't know what the temperature was, well below zero. Rocco was told with the other officers, go out and check your posts and patrols all around One Police Plaza. One Police Plaza and the whole city was filthy. The city was filthy. There was trash all over the place. There was leftover construction equipment here and there, scattered about around the perimeter of One Police Plaza. They didn't have proper lighting. They didn't have it fenced off. This was wide open. There was newspapers, food trash laid around the perimeter of the building. But that's the way the whole city was at that time.
I talked about it being shown in films and immortalized in films earlier. Yeah, you know.
So what I'm trying to do is paint you verbally a picture, a snapshot, if you will. Rocco was told by the sergeant, go out and check for bombs. What does a bomb look like? I'm being facetious. These men had no proper training.
Of course not.
I'm talking about the uniform officers now. It's New Year's Eve. It is bitter cold. It is the wind is cutting through you like a knife. You're wearing a nylon duty jacket. You're wearing those gray gloves that don't keep your hands warm at all. You got a plastic D-cell flashlight. It's New Year's Eve. You'd rather be home with your wife and family or out with your girlfriend, and you're stuck working. Walking around, shining the light, garbage everywhere. And I want to qualify this story because when I went down to Redstone Arsenal for training as a bomb tech initially for my basic training, formal training, the instructors were telling us how screwed up we were up in New York in the NYPD Bomb Squad because members of the bomb squad walked up and kicked the package. knowing it could be a bomb. That still makes me angry to think of that. They know the real story now. But when we went down there, we had to defend ourselves from day one. And I talked to the men who were injured that night. And here's what happened. Rocco was walking. It is bitter cold, dark. He's got this cheap little plastic flashlight, looking around for a bomb. Again, I ask you, what does a bomb look like?
It could look like anything. There's no way to know.
Thank you. Again, I'm being facetious here.
Of course.
As he's walking around his assigned perimeter, in the dark, trash everywhere, construction stuff laying around, you can't help but walk on some of the trash. I mean, there's that much of it. His shoe brushes against a paper sack that contained a Kentucky Fried Chicken box with a rolled up newspaper stuck in it, like yesterday's lunch, just tossed to the side. Blends in perfectly. What we believe happened that night, in hindsight, and by no means let this not be misunderstood. This is not a criticism of anyone's actions that night. It is not. It's just a description of what happened, which could have happened to anyone. His foot brushes against it as he's walking the perimeter, walking through trash and old construction equipment with his little flashlight. His foot brushes against this paper sack with the Kentucky Fried Chicken box in it. We believe what happened was a hang fire. Now, what is a hang fire? The device consisted of a bullseye mechanical wind-up pocket watch, wired up with a 9-volt battery with DuPont blasting caps and gelatin dynamite that was disguised inside. The arms on the clock were touching the contact to complete the simple circuit to make the bomb go off. These things were not meant to be put together in this manner, of course, but they were. Separately, they're innocent items. We'll put them together. Now you have an improvised explosive device, or a bomb as it was called at the time. By Rocco's foot, gently, he didn't kick it. His foot brushed against it ever so slightly. It was enough to jar that contact to complete the circuit. It exploded violently. It took his leg off right below the knee, not including numerous other injuries to his body, as well as his eardrums and many other injuries. But the biggest injury was he lost his leg below the knee. Richie and Tony are responding from the NYPD Bomb Squad. They're both junior men. One is a bomb tech, one is a dog handler. We had separate training for the men at that time. Again, this is by no means a criticism of the actions of what they did that night. It's just a very
it's just the way it was,
honest description as it was told to me.
Right.
Okay. And again, a little teaser. In my book, I got interviewed by Richie and Tony in the back room of the bomb squad when I first got there. And they sat next to me and put their hands in my hands with their missing fingers. And told me, Richie took his sunglasses off and wanted me to touch his face. And he touched my face to read my, I guess, my emotions of the features in my face. And told me in great detail, Richie and Tony, what happened to them that night. And asked me point blank, very calmly, why do you want to come to this squad when this can happen to you? Tell me why you want to be here. That's one of the most difficult questions I have ever answered. But going back to that night, Rocco's on the ground. There's chaos. Everybody in the world is responding now. Officer down, calling frantically for an ambulance. He could bleed out and die. EMTs get there. They're applying, basically, I believe, some type of tourniquet and trying to get his leg with the thought of, an amputation. Bellevue was known for reattaching, fingers, hands, limbs, and stuff like that. They're frantically trying to keep him alive. Richie and Tony pull up. He's screaming that he needs to talk to these officers from the bomb squad. Imagine just being blown up.
That was the most incredible part for me. And that speaks to his character. That despite severe injuries, as you said, in which he could die from, he still wants to say, no, let me tell these guys what happened.
Absolutely.
It's incredible.
Absolutely. I mean, I still get chills talking about this.
I got chills reading
and
about
I wasn't there.
Yeah.
And he's pleading to talk to them. Unbelievable pain. He could die, but he wants them to know exactly what happened. How he believed the bomb went off. And more importantly, he doesn't want that to happen to them. Incredible. Now, Richie and Tony suit up. Procedures are different back then than they are now.
Yeah, there's no robots.
And again, I will preface this that these were three incredibly brave men. The procedures were back then that you take the explosive detection canine, was Hi-Hat, the German Shepherd. Mm-hmm. Excellent dog, highly trained and experienced. They brought the dog up onto the package. The dog backed off, turned, and sat. That's the response that the dog smells positively explosives. They pulled the dog back. What the coordinated efforts, again, procedures are different today, and this is no criticism of the procedures or anybody involved that night.
Of course.
If anything, it speaks to their courage and their bravery.
Absolutely.
The procedure was emergency service set something up over the suspected bomb, IED. They placed a bomb blanket, which was probably about 10 or 12 feet by 10 or 12 feet, with multiple thick layers, maybe 3 inches thick of Kevlar. The thought, again, this is not a defined science, especially back then, was that if the device goes off, the blast pressure and fragmentation don't go out and injure or kill innocent people. Now, it was late at night, but you have a big Chinese community, as you know, down there, Little Italy and Chinatown. Many of the people who live and work there, even late at night, they're walking back and forth as a conduit to make it easy to get, from point A to point B.
Right.
Many of the Chinese people don't speak English. And talking to the people who were there that night, they were trying to get them to move away, but there was this lack of communication because of language. Richie and Tony approached the package again, and Tony said that he's going to be with Richie to be his second set of hands, because even though one is a dog handler and one is a tech, there's times you need a second set of hands. So Tony had said that to Richie, and they did it's been coined a phrase in certain circles, mostly within the bomb technician community, as doing the long walk. I think the British bomb techs coined that phrase, and we have continued to say that. From the safe area into harm's way, right up onto that package. They did the long walk. They went up there. Now it's on the ground. It's dark. You don't have good lighting. They're going to have to lift that bomb blanket up so they can see the device to work on it. Bitter cold, bone-chilling cold, bad lighting, trash everywhere. Things are unfolding very quickly. Now, I'm talking about this safe and sound and warm in my own home, but things were unraveling that night very quickly. They didn't have on the bomb suits with the helmets. They didn't have the blower assemblies. Now, let me explain what that is. It's kind of a tube that comes off the back of the helmet with a little electric motor in it, with a fan. And what that does, it takes the ambient air that's out here behind you and pushes it through rubber tubes in the helmet that come along the side by your eyes and blow it on the inside, not the outside, the inside of the face shield. That's to prevent condensation. Let me go back again and mention to you, well below zero, high winds that are cutting through you with the cold like a knife. Tony, Richie, they just spoke to a brother officer who just was blown up.
Maimed.
Leg blown off. Could bleed out and die. But all he wanted to do was tell the officers from the bomb squad, this is what I saw, this is what happened. I don't want it to happen to you. I'm a big amateur student of human nature. I think I had mentioned this to you previously when we first spoke. That night, picture yourself responding. There's Rocco Pastorella screaming to talk to you. There's another bomb waiting for you, just like that one. Your heart's got to be beating like crazy. You got to be breathing heavy. You got to be nervous. You got to be scared. You know, listen, we're bomb technicians, but we're still men. We still react to things that everybody else does. We're human. In doing so, they're breathing heavy. Your heart is up. You're nervous. You're breathing. The inside of that face shield is fogging up like mad because of the ambient weather conditions on the other side of the face shield. How are you going to work on a bomb when you bend down if you can't see through your face shield?
It's kind of like driving through a blizzard.
There you go.
You can't see.
They made a decision. And remember, we're talking about New Year's Eve, 1982. Not with all the high-tech stuff we have today.
No,
okay?
Not at all. Far from it.
They didn't have the blower assemblies on the helmets. So what they decided was they would release the piece that holds the face shield on and take it off so they can see. Both of them did that. They bend down. They very carefully start to lift the bomb blanket up. And as they lifted it up to see the package with the device, it functioned as designed. It detonated. High order detonation with dynamite. Okay. Now, there has been speculation over the years. Did it go off? Was it just bad timing that at that moment the the clock ran out of time, or possibly that it was another hang fire, like the first one with Rocco, that the littlest disturbance of the package, that possibly the points were touching on the clock, and that was just enough to complete the circuit. Could never prove it one way or the other. From experience and knowledge, if I had to bet the pension check, I would probably lean toward the fact that it was possibly another hang fire, because that's what happened with the other one, and that was made exactly the same way as that one.
And that proved to be.
It exploded violently. It lifted them off their feet. They were bent over, like kneeling down, lifted them up backwards and threw them back, probably about anywhere from 8 to 15 feet, as told to me by witnesses of that night.
In the end,
they were rushed by members of emergency service and EMTs to Bellevue Emergency Hospital, where Rocco was transported also. What happens next is that Charlie Wells came in off duty, Sergeant Wells from home, one of the most experienced bomb techs. He was a tunnel rat in Vietnam, which you can only imagine the stuff that he experienced there, going into tunnels to try to find the enemy and booby traps that they set up, to kill other Marines.
Right.
Charlie Wells comes with another bomb squad detective. I apologize, I can't think of his name off the top of my head.
Frank DeChico.
Frank DeChico, thank you. Thank you for that. They're in suit and ties. Rocco's just been transported away. Richie and Tony are fighting for their lives, being transported out of the area. They show up. Charlie Wells is one of these people who, I guess because of he was a Marine and he served in combat in Vietnam, he's one of the most calmest people under stress that I ever met in my life. The stuff is hitting the fan. Things are going on around him. He stays nice and level. Doesn't raise his voice. Talks in a very clear, concise way. He walks over. He's looking at the scene. Oh, by the way, there's another bomb.
There's 4 planted in one night. That's kind of, and I can't tell this story as well as you are.
No, but I thank you for injecting some of these things. But my focus now is telling you, and I heard the story from the people who were there, from Charlie himself. You should.
I'm trying.
Charlie.
I'm trying hard, and hopefully, listen. I mean, let me just send a message to a couple people. Hopefully, Inspector Wells comes on. But to Inspector Wells and to Dan McNally, I say this, and of course, I say this kiddingly. But Bill Ryan has already sat in this chair. Don Sadowy's sitting in this chair now. Don and I have been talking for 2 hours. Wow, time's really flying. To Dan and to Inspector Wells, you're next. Time's coming. You're coming on this podcast. You are next. I'm coming for you. Anyway, continue.
So anyway, Charlie Wells says he finds Richie Pastorella's fingers that were blown off on the plaza.
Wow.
Richie had a ring on his finger that was a miniature detective shield with a diamond in it. Charlie tells me he gathers the fingers and he quickly gives them to officers to give to EMTs to put them in ice and transport them to the hospital with the thought possibly of reattaching his fingers. But he took the ring off the finger and he put it on his hand with the hopes that this was going to give him good luck in dealing with the next devices. And they went up. They did the most dangerous thing you could do as a bomb tech. It's called a hand entry. It's the absolute last resort. To put it politely, and I know you want me to keep this polite, we call times like that testicles to the wall.
Yeah.
They went up. They got on their knees. They blessed themselves. Believe it or not, a lot of bomb techs used to keep a rosary in their pocket. A lot of the old timers. They won't say it, but they did.
They did.
And they blessed themselves. And Frank held it, and Charlie cut into it, and he cut the wires, rendered it safe, with very, very little time left on the clock.
He won a Medal of Valor for that, by the way,
Yes.
as he should have.
Yes. And there's actually, they built a little building because of the influx of visitors that come to One Police Plaza. Instead of them getting all backed up in the lobby, going through the x-ray machines and everything, they built a little building, one-story building on the plaza before you go into the inner perimeter. And it's where, like, you can go in and take your package and get it x-rayed, and you walk through a magnetometer, and then they give you a pass, to go in the building.
Right. Mm-hmm.
On the outside of that building, up about 8 feet above the door, there's a brass plaque put up there. Rocco, Richie, and Tony, their names are on that with the date. And just a little sentiment of explaining what happened here at that time. So that's basically New Year's Eve, 1982. I was part of the squad by then.
You got it there in 1985, and I do. And I can talk with you.
84 right there.
84, actually. My bad. I do, and I could listen to you all day, but we're at 2 hours and 22 minutes, so I'll speed ahead. Because it's been such a fascinating chat with you, and obviously you've led a very fascinating life. So you get to the bomb squad in 84, and there were some cases. I'll have to bring you back to discuss them more in depth. Obviously, there was Larry Davis, which you responded to, the manhunt for him involving some pipe bombs. We'll have to dive into that case deeper another time.
Sure.
There was the Mad Bomber as well, Dennis Malvasi, that he came around committing various bombings also around 1986, 87, and that you'll come back for.
That's a very lengthy case, as you know.
Yes.
In the book.
And we're going to, in the future, we're going to dedicate an episode to that.
Yeah.
So that there was that, and he was another dangerous individual. But the case that, a couple of things I want to talk with you, and we're also doing an episode, hopefully, on the future, on 96 TWA Flight 800. But
another lengthy and interesting case.
And hopefully in the future there'll be 3 separate episodes at various points. I don't know when, but we'll dedicate an episode to Larry Davis, the Mad Bomber, and TWA, because there's not enough time, unfortunately, to fit it in here. Although I really wish I could. But the case, 2 things I want to touch on. The last thing is September 11th, and a man that you worked with and loved that was one of the many heroes that was lost that day. But the first thing before we get to September 11th is the case that really defines your career, or one of the defining cases of your career, at least, and that is February 26, 1993, bombing of the World Trade Center, the first attack on the Trade Center. So I'll set the stage and you take it from there. It's February 26, 1993. It's a dreary winter day. It's snowing. It's sleeting. It's your typical winter day in New York City. Terrorists led by Ramzi Youssef drive, for those of you that are listening, you can visualize it. Those delivery trucks that we see, the Ryder trucks and things like that. They're driving one of those trucks. They have a bomb loaded into that truck, and they have planned this for a while. These were even though they're evil, they're not stupid. They were very skilled men in this regard. And unfortunately, they chose to use their skills for evil as opposed to good. They parked the truck underneath the North Tower. They're in the parking garage in the North Tower. There was a 20-foot fuse, and I don't mean to be humorous. This is not funny. People died. 6 people, as a matter of fact. But if you watch the Looney Tunes, they light the fuse, and the fuse goes, and TNT blows up. You see, anybody that grew up watching cartoons knows what I'm talking about. They did that, except this is very real. They leave, get out of Dodge, go around the corner to watch the result of their evil work, A few moments later, the bomb detonates, killing 6. Now, before I get to Don, he's over at the bomb squad offices, which was at the time housed above the 6th precinct. He's with his partner, Steve Berberich, another great bomb squad detective who hopefully I can have on someday. Don, take it from there.